All right. All right, we are live on YouTube. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We have Andy here today, so we have a little. I want to share some things here quickly, kind of get us started off. So I just want to like to welcome Andy Grabner. Am I saying that correctly?
Hey, thanks. Good. Yeah, Andy.
Okay.
Andy is obviously my nickname, but everybody calls me Andy.
Andy Grabner. Yeah. Excellent. So I just want to welcome Andy to our July edition of the DevOps online meetup. So we are giving away, as I think it might be similar to the t-shirt Andy has on. His employer Dynatrace is giving away a couple t-shirts. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat for everyone so everybody can see that. And but Andy, introduce yourself to the people here at the DevOps online meetup. So appreciate that you joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm based in Austria. So Austria, not Australia. I guess Australia, it would be dark. Here it's still sun, no, not really sunshine, but it's 8 o'clock at night. I've been working in performance engineering, observability, DevOps, whatever you want to call it, for the last 20 plus years. Started as a actually as a tester, then an engineer, and then I switched over to more advocacy. And for the last 14 years, I've been doing this for my employer, Dynatrace. In the last 2.5 years, very much focused on our open source project Keptn, which will also be, I think, the star of the show today. We're showing you stuff that is free, that is open source, and trying to grow the community and getting feedback on if the stuff we're building actually solves problems. And if not yet, then what do we need to do to solve problems of the DevOps community?
Excellent, Andy. Well, you want to kick it off and share your presentation? I know you got some things there. You got some slides and a few live demos you're going to do. So
exactly. So perfect. So what I will show, I have Keptn with me. We'll come to this in a second, but just so that you know, this is no PowerPoint where that I'm having here. I have a couple of environments where I want to show you how Keptn deals with SLIs and SLOs. I think this is part of the topic, service level indicators, service level objectives, to automatically validate the quality of your releases, of your tests, of your deployments, whatever it is. Keptn, however, can do more than just validation. As you will see, I have a couple of projects. I have, for instance, one here where I'm using Argo Rollout, which is, I think, a very prominent, popular framework these days for doing canary deployments. And then every canary phase that Keptn is kind of rolling out through Argo, it automatically does the quality gate evaluation through SLIs and SLOs, and then gives you immediate feedback, good enough, go to the next phase, or not good enough. So Keptn has different things it can do. In the end, it really solves a big pain point, which we believe is it provides easy automation and is basically connecting all the tools that you love and that you need for your job. So we'll come back to this in a second. If you're interested in Keptn, go to keptn.sh. This is our main website. There's also, some easy ways to install it, to also have a live demo environment. So if you click on Explore Live Demo, it will get you to one of our tutorials. I encourage you to first watch the video because Jürgen, my colleague, he's walking through some of the scenarios. And then there's actually a public Keptn cluster here that we have with a couple of projects, whether it is actually one with chaos engineering using Litmus, a multi-stage delivery, a second one with a different app, and then also a feature flagging example. So I think there's plenty of things here that will hopefully show you and kind of get your hands-on experience. But I do have a couple of slides because I want to explain to you why we're doing all of this, so that you have hopefully more information on what questions to ask, so that you see what we're doing. So as I said, Andy Grabner, feel free to follow up with me later on Twitter or LinkedIn. The links on the bottom right is everything related to Keptn, the website, Twitter handle. We would love stars on GitHub, and also we have a Slack channel, slack.keptn.sh, to get a hold of us. Now, what are we doing actually? I think what we have seen in our organization and with people we have been working with, DevOps and site reliability engineers, they have to do a lot of automation, or they're responsible for automating more and more tasks through their existing pipelines, right? And I'm sure this list is by far not complete. There's clearly also no shortage of do-it-yourself Swiss Army knife tools, right? I love Jenkins. Jenkins is great, has been around for a long time. There's many other tools. So there's obviously nothing holds me back to execute tests, adding result analysis of my tests, adding notifications to maybe push things to Slack, integrate with your APM, adding approval processes, adding care. I mean, you can obviously do everything with whatever your tool of choice, your Swiss Army knife tool is, whatever scripting language that is. The only challenge is that if you do everything yourself and building all these integrations, and then you are somebody like Christian, who is a senior DevOps engineer at ERT, having to manage 2,800 projects and about 1,000 CI/CD pipelines. And if those pipelines, just to do a deployment, a test, and some analysis, are 1,000 lines long, and this is not only for one pipeline, but for many, then this is something that causes him to not sleep that well at night, because he's always reacting to Slack messages, right? Pipeline broken, please fix, because he's responsible for those pipelines that kind of got out of hand. So pipelines getting very complex if you do everything yourself and build an integration in. Second thing is, this is an example from one of my colleagues, Dieter, who works as an autonomous cloud engineer at Dynatrace, responsible also for delivery. And what he has been doing, he actually said, well, we started off as we went from our classical infrastructure and architecture monolith to more services, microservices. We obviously used Jenkins internally. We started with the first Jenkins pipeline that was very small and nice and easy to maintain. Then onboarded more project, more services, some slight modifications, because every service has a little thing that it needs specifically, or some tools are just like specific to certain environments. And so we ended up with a snowflake effect of different permutations of the same pipeline. And we actually did the exercise to, or he did the exercise to analyze code duplication within our Jenkins pipeline. And we figured out that most of the code is integration code and process kind of management code, if then else, right? And this is obviously highly technical debt, right? That we typically know from our business code. So this is where Keptn, my Keptn comes in, right? So what we really try to do with Keptn, my Keptn, we really looked at this fundamental problem that we see currently in the DevOps automation and DevOps pipelines, that you have one big config file typically, where you on the left side have your process definition, right? You code it from top to bottom, and you're having often hard-coded integrations, whether through plugins or libraries or whatever, or even through Bash that is embedded. You're calling your individual tools, and then sometimes you even have configuration kind of in that Jenkins pipeline, for instance, like a Helm chart, like Bash scripts. And this is obviously not maintainable and doesn't scale. So what we are set out to do, or we've done with Keptn, we said we are breaking these barriers. And basically what we say, well, what do we actually have? We have on the left side a process, a clear defined process, how your organization is doing building, deploying, testing, and so on. On the right side, you have different tools that provide different capabilities. You may have one tool for deployment, but maybe you have different depending on the environment or technology. You may have different monitoring tools for different environments, different notification tools. So you have capabilities on the right side. And then we said, well, I think the best thing is to not mix process configuration with your actual configuration, your Helm charts, your SLIs, your SLOs, your runbook. We'll put them into Git. And then we connect everything through eventing, just as you would do as a normal software engineer. That means you specify a process, and then as Keptn is orchestrating the process for you, is basically saying, I need to do build, I need to do prepare. And then if, let's say, deploy comes along, Keptn sends an event, and then whichever tool that has a capability to handle the deploy event is then receiving that event with some additional metadata, like we need to deploy this container into this stage, let's say with the blue green strategy. This tool can be Jenkins, it can be Helm, it can be whatever you have. Picks it up, executes it, and when it's done, sends back the information to Keptn, and then Keptn continues with the orchestration of the process on the left. So our terminology is we have a shipyard file that specifies sequences of tasks that you want to automate. They're organized by stage, so you can really model your automation sequences per stage. If you do have different stages in your end-to-end process, you can also chain them together. So if one sequence is done successfully, then you can call another sequence, like the classical promotion from, let's say, dev to QA to hardening to production. Then we have how we call it the uniform, right? Obviously, we are staying in the Nordic, like Nautic, not naughty, but Nordic terms. It's the Keptn's uniform. Yeah, it's the tool belt. These are all the services. And then we have our configuration in Git, and we are using cloud events. And we're currently working with the CDF, the Continuous Delivery Foundation, to standardize the cloud events that we have come up with over the last year and a half, to bake it into a public open standard so that the events that we are sending are automatically understood by any other tool that is adhering to the same standard, which makes this even easier. Right? Because right now, if you want to build a tool integration, you need to subscribe to an event in Keptn, then we'll send you a specific cloud event with specific metadata. And we're currently standardizing all of this.
You're doing that with the CNCF? Is that what you said?
With the CDF, with the
CDF,
Continuous Delivery Foundation. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Keptn itself is a CNCF sandbox project. We just started and launched our process to become incubate, like the next status level incubation. Yeah. But with the CDF, we're working on standardizing delivery integrations through the CDF eventing. Yeah. So this is how this works. So in the end, what this really means, right, coming back to the problem statement I raised earlier, of course, nobody can hold you off of building the best automation with the tool of choice that you love. And you can sure do it. But the question is, do you want to do it? Do you want to maintain and manage all these custom tool integrations? Or you want to rather go to Keptn? So on Keptn, on the right side here, you see such a shipyard file where you specify per sequence, per stage, dev, staging, prod, what type of sequences you want to execute, right? There's no mentioning in here about which tool is doing a job, like Monaco, monitoring as code. This can trigger any type of monitoring tool you have to configure, let's say, your Prometheus, your Dynatrace, your New Relic, your Datadog. Deployment can then trigger whatever tool you have for deployment. So you specify the process definition, and then everything else happens automatically through eventing. We have seen 90% less automation code. I think it's a good way to separate process from tooling, because right now, if everything is in one big block, you have different people that need to edit the same file that holds critical process and tooling information. This is a nightmare, right? Everything is in Git. SLOs are built in. We have in the between, after every step, we can validate your SLOs for you. And based on that, then decide, should the process stop because your SLOs are violated, or should it continue? And most importantly, we're not throwing away any tools. Keptn itself does not do deployment. Keptn does not do monitoring or notifications. Keptn is orchestrating it in a very smart and easy way. Right? And the nice thing is, Keptn doesn't stay standalone. As I said, it integrates with different tools, but obviously it is integrated by different tools. So when we still want people to use their Jenkins for CI, or let's say their GitHub for whatever they do with GitLab, for instance, or Harness or extra release. But for those tasks that you need to automate, whether it's just quality gates, SLO-based evaluation, whether it's testing and quality gates, whether it's monitoring configuration, testing and quality gates, or even deployment, you just specify the sequence that you want to automate, and then you call that sequence through the Keptn API from your existing pipeline or through webhooks, through GitHub Actions, and then Keptn will orchestrate the rest for you. Right? And with orchestrating really means it takes away all the pain of building all these tool integrations and maintaining them. Right? Some more, it's a quick word on Shipyard, aka defining your automation sequence. As I mentioned earlier, you have these sequence names, and then they will then, as Keptn is executing them, Keptn will send events, right? We call them the cloud events. So for instance, if the testing sequence is triggered, it sends out a Keptn SH functional, because that's the stage name, testing.triggered. So it really triggers, for instance, that stage. And then within that stage, it then picks up, sends events for the actual tasks. What's also really great is if a sequence is finished, as you can see here, you can have conditional executions of sequence. You can say, I want to, if let's say testing is done where you do some functional testing, then you want to execute the next sequence that is performance light, which should be triggered if the functional testing stage finished. But what really happens within that stage is, again, or within this sequence, is up to whoever specifies the process. Right? And so on and so forth, right? So I think it's extremely powerful to define these sequences, and within the sequence, you then have the tasks that should actually be executed. If you want to integrate your own tools, right? Even though we have a good-sized community already with some existing tool integrations, we provide different templates how people can write their own tools. Once we get really this CDF standard through, we believe that more tools out of the box will just support subscribing to these CDF events, which are heavily driven by what we are doing. And then you don't even need this, what we call now a Keptn service. Like for the JMeter example, if you want JMeter or any other tool to kind of participate in an automation sequence to handle a certain event, like a test event, then you need to subscribe to it. We have already an existing component. It's called a distributor that you can just use, subscribes to a certain event. And once the event is coming in, it just calls your little piece of code. That is then kind of the shim, the integration layer to the actual test tool. For instance, like if you integrate a test tool, once the test is executed, then it sends all the appropriate events. So that means the way this works, Keptn is always starting with sending a triggered event. We are triggering a certain task. If the tool decides I can do it, it sends a started event, then runs the task, and once it's done, it sends a finished event. With this, also Keptn can keep track of where are we in the process right now. Right? A very big part is SLOs for data-driven decisions. So one task that you can include, and everybody kind of includes, is so-called evaluation. Evaluation means, hey, Keptn, I'm at a certain part of my stage, of my sequence. I now want you to reach out to my monitoring tool and evaluate all the SLIs and SLOs I have specified for my project. The evaluation is handled by a core service that comes with Keptn. It's called the Lighthouse service. What the Lighthouse service does, it looks at a so-called SLO YAML. So you specify service level objectives in a YAML file where you say which SLI, so which metric like error rate should have which criteria. And you can specify multiple of those. And what you also see here, separation of concerns, we just specify what SLI, not how do we retrieve this SLI. This is handled by the individual SLI providers. So that means whoever you are, and if you say my response time needs to be, or my error rate needs to be smaller than 1%, then I want this to be enforced regardless of which monitoring tool is actually capturing that data. Right? So also two different people that are defining SLOs and maybe how the monitoring works. So we have different SLI providers, and depending on the SLI providers, you then specify how the SLI provider is then actually querying these individual metrics. Right? Can be different language. Like for Prometheus, it's PromQL. For Dynatrace, it's the Dynatrace language. And for other tools, it's whatever else it is. And then the way this works, Keptn orchestrates the whole process. The SLI providers will retrieve the values for the time frame. They also get some additional context about the environment. And then the Lighthouse service takes all this data and then compares it against the SLOs and then comes up with a nice scoring overall. And what's really nice here, the comparison is not just against static thresholds, but you can see here on the count DB calls example, I'm basically saying, I want to evaluate the number of database calls my service that is maybe, let's say, under test is doing. I want to make sure that we're only allowing a 2% increase. That means we can also specify relative conditions because Keptn also keeps a baseline to previous builds. And then you can also do very easy regression detection combined with, but I'm not allowing more than, let's say, 10 calls overall. All right, last but not least, Keptn itself, if you install it, you have the so-called control plane. This is where all the orchestration magic happens, and the SLIs and SLOs, all the core components, they live in a control plane. That means you install them somewhere in any Kubernetes cluster. And then the actual execution plane, these are the individual Keptn services that are then actually really doing the job, like running the test, doing the Helm deployment, talking with the tool. They can then obviously live in different places. Right? And with this, you fully support obviously multi-stage orchestration. You install the tools in the environment. These tools register to the API and basically poll the control plane. Hey, I'm the Helm service. I'm in this execution plane. I'm handling this environment, this project with this type of technology. Do you have anything for me to do? Right? That's basically what it is. All right. Cool. That means multi-cluster support is also supported with some users that are using Keptn to first orchestrate, kind of a dev environment where they do some functional testing, then deploy it into a staging where some performance and chaos engineering testing comes, and then they do multi-stage parallel deployments into different environments where they trigger the different delivery activities. So
is there a lot to setting up the multi-cluster if you need that?
And not really, because if you have multi-cluster, what you really do, you install that execution plane on these clusters. And when you install them, you give them some metadata and say, hey, you are responsible for handling events in case Keptn wants you to do anything in this particular environment. Right.
So then once you do that, it's set up.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. So let's see and explore it a little bit in action. I think I have shown you some pieces earlier already. Now my Keptn, let me just show you this here. kubectl get ports Keptn. So this is a standard installation, right? I actually have control and execution plan running. Here I'm actually using an EC2 machine. I just installed K3s or keys, lightweight Kubernetes, and I just did a Keptn install and then installed some additional things like the JMeter service is installed. I also installed Argo service for Argo deployments and the Dynatrace integration, obviously, because I work for Dynatrace and this is my tool of choice here. You also have the Keptn CLI, right? So the Keptn CLI is one way to interact with Keptn, where you can start automating, you can trigger events, you can trigger executions, you can configure things, you can create projects and so on and so forth. Another option to interact with Keptn is, actually this is my demo environment, is through the API. So we have a Swagger, a nice Swagger UI, so you can easily see, how you can post an event to trigger an action. There's also, you can have full access to the data store. So all the data you have in Keptn, you can also pull out. You can manage your secrets, because Keptn, obviously, certain tools need secrets to communicate into other tools, and so on and so forth. So I think also very powerful here, and also standard. Right? Now, one thing I want to show you, because we talk about SLIs and SLOs, I have one project here that is kind of like a quality gate project, because a lot of people start with quality gates. A lot of people have, let's say, already some deployment, and then they may already have some tests, but they haven't figured out the evaluation yet, like how to automatically evaluate the quality of that deployment. And what I have here is a project that is automatically evaluating for me a couple of SLIs and SLOs. Now I can, if I want to, specify all of this in YAMLs. So let me show you this quickly. If I go to my Dynatrace project, like you can see here, we have Git upstreams. So behind the scenes, we have Git repositories, and I just specified an upstream here. That means in my Dynatrace project, under my quality gate branch, every stage in my shipyard file, so every stage for Keptn automatically becomes a branch. And then here, for instance, in demo, I have my SLO, right? This is my SLO YAML that I've specified. This is just for me. Also, what I have here my SLI. So this is kind of like the queries behind the scenes. Now, if I'm familiar with it, that's great. I can modify my SLIs and SLOs. However, what we have done for, let's see, this particular demo here, a lot of people are visual, right? We like visuals. We first like to drag and drop things into dashboards. So what I've actually built, or what we have built, and this is now for Dynatrace, we're also trying to do the same thing for Grafana, and then based on Prometheus data, but I can build a dashboard like this. So I just built a Dynatrace dashboard. I put all the metrics on, all my SLIs that are important for me. I can augment my dashboard with some pass and warning information, whether this is a key SLI, yes or no. So I can also specify different weights, but I visually specify what I want. I would normally analyze manually. And now what I can do, I can say Keptn trigger evaluation project Dynatrace stage is quality gate service, I think is demo, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check. What did I say here? Demo, right? And then I can specify time frame, let's say 30 minutes. Hopefully I didn't make a typo, quality gate. So I basically say, Keptn, you go off. I just ran a test. Now analyze the last 30 minutes. I can also do some labels here. I can say build ID, if this comes out of Jenkins, let's say is 10 and executed by Jenkins. And then I can say Jenkins URL equals HTTPS. It's getting dark here. Jenkins.local/my project. Let's see if this also works. So I'm kicking off an event. I always get back a context ID. This also then allows me to do a Keptn get event to figure out how far is that process going. Because if you're kicking this off from one tool, you want to wait until it's done. Right? So let's see what happened. Here we go. Right. I now have this evaluation, and then let's see. Sorry, and then the last evaluation here with build number 10. This came in executed by Jenkins with the Jenkins URL. And it really just evaluated that time frame with all the data that was pulled out of my dashboard. And then I can easily integrate this with my Jenkins. So if I want to, I can then call this from anywhere and integrate it. Last but not least, because I know people are interested in some deployment scenarios as well. So here I have my Argo rollout example. So here it's nice. I can see staging and I can see production. Right, so I can actually switch between the two stages. What happened? I can see build number 1 is in staging and now in production. I can kick build number 2 off. I can actually see if I go to the sequence view, and this is what I really like. In the sequence view, you really see, hey, in staging there was a delivery sequence, and in that sequence we first had Monaco calling out to the monitoring tool to configure it correctly, then doing the deployment, then doing an initial validation, then doing a release, then running some tests, then the evaluation. We also have approval processes in here, which means we can even then ask either a human being or we have automated approvals depending on your result of your evaluation. And then it went over to production. And in production, we had multiple canary phases. So we started with a certain percentage. And I think what's nice here, we're using Argo. So here I have the full Argo output. I know exactly, Keptn told Argo at this stage, we're ready to go to production. Let's roll it out to the next kind of sequence. Right? And all this configuration, I cannot stress this enough. If I go to my demo rollout project, right, in the end, it comes down to my shipyard, where I specify my staging, my delivery sequence, Monaco, deployment, validate, test, release. This is just my process and what should happen. It doesn't say anything about which tool. Right? The tools later on come in because if I go back here to my demo rollout, to my staging environment, the tools, let's say deployment or let's say release, that's handled by Helm, by Argo, right? Keptn is sending out such an event. It is sending an event of a particular type, release triggered, and this is then handled by, in my case, Helm and also Argo. And then Argo says, yes, I've just promoted this, because release is a term, like with release, we mean you've deployed something earlier, but now you're releasing it, maybe switching the load balancer to actually release it to the world, or release the next batch of environments.
So then in that case, basically there's an event created and then Argo is the listener that comes along.
Exactly. Argo comes in and says, hey, first of all, yes, I want to handle this. And as is the Helm service. Argo first says, start it. So Argo says, hey, I'm taking this. I'm starting my activity. And then once it's done, it basically sends, hey, here's all the text. And then also the pass and warning. And then it goes on to the next stage.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe the last thing I want to show, because you wonder, okay, where does Argo or Helm or any other tool get the test files, the deployment files? Mm-hmm. Everything is in Git. Right? So if I go to my demo rollup project, here I have my prod and staging branches. So under staging, I have folders for my individual services. And here I have subfolders for my individual tools. For instance, for Helm, I have here my Helm charts. Right? And I just used the Argo CD example here. And then Argo services, because every service that participates in a workflow has full access to that part of the Git repository it needs to act in. Okay. Right? And it can then access those files. It's also pretty neat, I would say. And then last thing maybe was also, I think, pretty cool. There's no test files in here, even though we have some tests. We have an inheritance option. So you can actually upload files to the main branch, which means these files, let's say JMeter, these files are available for the Gmeter service in any type of stage, because I upload it to master, to main, and then you can upload things to your individual branches or even to service level, like with an inheritance level here as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and with this, right, I know this was fast. What my goal for today was, I wanted to show you that whoever you are, I'm pretty sure you have certain use cases that you need to automate, whether it's just quality gates, delivery. With SRE automation, we mean performance testing, chaos engineering. Auto-remediation is another big use case we can do. We're not just doing delivery, we also can use the same automation sequence for auto-remediation. Pick your use case, bring your configuration, your SLIs, your SLOs, your YAML files, whatever you have, connect your tools, and then have Keptn automate the whole automation sequence for you. A Keptn is really then using the declarative, that the stuff you've declared, executes the processes, talks with the right tools through open standards. And I think this is the powerful thing about Keptn, bringing easy automation. And don't take my word for it. We have different organizations that have already successfully implemented Keptn, whether it's for quality gate automation and testing, whether it is for complete performance test automation, or whether it's for complete delivery automation. We have a couple of nice testimonials. They have already spoken at our Keptn meetups. And the last testimonial that I have is somebody that became, I think, a good connection for me, is Tara. She's a software engineer at Facebook. And I think that's a nice quote to get. Keptn feels like the reference implementation of Google's site reliability engineering and the site reliability workbook.
That's a pretty good endorsement.
It is, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
With this, we have tutorials for you. Mm-hmm. And remember, we have a live public demo that you can also get this from the tutorials, or just on the keptn.sh website, click on live tutorial, and then you can just click through the Keptn installation.
Excellent. Excellent, Andy. Well, this is a lot of good stuff. Just a couple quick questions. As you were going through this, I was thinking about, so you shared a lot there, Andy. You kind of talked us through, got us some tutorials. My guess is, though, you probably hear, because you're deep in this community, what are some things, like where maybe some common struggling points that people, because it looks like there's a lot there that we could want to jump in and do all of it, but what do you see people struggling with?
Common struggle point is, I know the world is moving to Kubernetes, and we believe everybody's already there, but a lot of people are still very unfamiliar with Kubernetes, and therefore Keptn requires a Kubernetes cluster. But the good news is, and this is also what we did, we have some very lightweight versions of it. So if you go to our tutorials, we bring, for instance, one is called Keptn in a box. Mm-hmm. It only requires a Linux machine, and it actually installs micro Kubernetes for you and then Keptn on it. So it takes away the pain of having to understand Kubernetes. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing that people struggle with, I think, we already have, I would say, a good set of tool integrations, but then there's always the question, and do you also support this tool? And do you also support this tool? Yeah. And then our answer is not yet, but we would love to. And so our answer is, right, you go to Keptn Sandbox. So we have different Git repositories. The Sandbox is really where new services start living, integrations like Locust, Litmus, AWS, Jira service. And if you have a tool that is not yet integrated, we have a template for you. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And then one other thing, I guess, Andy, as technology people, we always, some of us are coming to things like this. We're learning all sorts of great stuff, but then we go back to maybe talk to one of our coworkers or maybe our manager. How do we, what are some, some real important selling points? Because I think there's a lot of good things here, but what would you, if you were trying to influence maybe a decision maker about using this?
So the quote that I have started to use is, friends don't let friends build their own delivery automation. That's the first thing. And the reason why I'm going back to Christian, this is something that shouldn't happen. Mm-hmm. This is something that shouldn't happen. We shouldn't build the same automation, the same tool integrations all over again, and then end up with code we have to maintain in pipelines. Mm-hmm. right? And this is exactly the problem we are solving. We are solving the problem that you shouldn't have, because you should focus as an organization on building value and not building the next delivery automation, right? This is what we are for. Yep. And it's not that we're building the delivery automation, we're building the thing that connects everything together through open standards and with quality in mind. This is why the SLOs are so important. We are bringing you SLOs front and center. It's SLO-driven engineering that we enable.
Excellent. Excellent. Andy, I just want to thank you so much for spending a little bit of your valuable time here, kind of sharing this with the group here on the DevOps Online Meetup. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
Yes. Yes. Just want to let everyone know, August 13th at noon Eastern, we're going to have continuous delivery in numbers with Prashit Singh. So you'll see that coming out. So I just want to thank everyone, and we'll see you all soon.